You're listening to Psych with Mike. If you enjoy the show, then help us out. Go to Apple Podcasts and rate us and leave us a comment. That is so beneficial for the show, and we would really, really appreciate it. But in addition to that, you can follow us on Twitter at Psych with Mike. You can like the Facebook page at Psych with Mike. And now you can even catch us on TikTok at Psych with Mike. So please subscribe to all of those different ways to stay connected to the show. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
How are you?
I'm doing well. You're doing well.
That's
I'm
right.
assuming.
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because you're getting ready to do your traveling thing again.
In a more socially discreet kind of way, yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's going to be socially discreet. I know it's going to be a long time.
It's going to be socially discreet. We're going to be as discreet where we're going as we are at home. We'll be alone. Mm-hmm. We won't be socializing. We'll be cooking at home. The only thing we'll do is go to the grocery store.
Oh, does that mean you don't want me to broadcast the address that you're going to be staying at?
Only if they're going to send money.
Oh, so people are going to continue to hear your dulcet
and
voice.
mellifluous tones. Yeah. That's right.
Because we're going to have lots of episodes that'll be in the queue.
I'm glad you didn't say in the tank.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll keep putting those out. But for all intents and purposes, you're going to be living in another state. You're going to do a thing like where you go and live somewhere else for, because I think if you stay somewhere more than 12 days, you're living there.
Okay.
That's my, I don't know why. I don't know why that's my cutoff, but that's my cutoff.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And so, have you ever done that before?
I have.
No.
Many times.
Where you've stayed somewhere for more than 3 or 4 weeks?
Any number of times in Europe, yeah.
Oh, that's right, because you're a Europe guy.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
You should go. It's a beautiful place.
Well, I mean, I've never stayed somewhere for more than 7 days.
It's because you're a homebody. You irritate the heck out of me when we travel together. Mm-hmm. And then you call home every 2 hours just to see if anything's changed. Is the temperature in the house warmer or colder? Did the sun come up there? It came up here.
Yeah.
It's really sad. You need to get a life.
It's not sad.
It is sad, man. I'm telling you.
I'm connected to my home. Just the idea of staying someplace for more than a week really feels scary.
My wife and I went to Europe for our honeymoon 35 years ago. We stayed for a month. It was awesome. Mm. We just roamed around. By the time she got home, she had been to more international capitals than she had been to state capitals in the United States. Yeah. We've since remedied that, but that's where we were.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love the idea of it, but I just don't know if... I had a therapist that you know well, and who retired, but she was always promoting the idea that I should go on the road and
take your show on the road. Yeah, there's a stage leaving in 20 minutes.
That speaking thing, and I just the idea. There's nothing about that appeals to me.
I did that for a while for the National Counseling Association. Traveled around the country and gave workshops and presentations as a national speaker. There were good times and bad times. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for me there would be more bad times, but. I am existentially anxious and challenged right now.
Well, let's talk about that. As we were saying, counseling, can you say a little more about that?
Well, so we are going to record this a few days before the inauguration. By the time this episode posts, Joe Biden will have been inaugurated, but we're a week away from the insurrection, and I've been talking to a lot of clients some of whom know that they are existentially challenged over what happened. Others who are experiencing a tremendous amount of anxiety, which clearly is associated with the pandemic and the political situation, even though they themselves may not be aware of it. And I am aware that within myself, this is causing a lot of angst and trepidation.
Good. I think people should be aware that that's what they are experiencing. We try to promote more self-awareness in counseling, because if you are self-aware, then you can do some things to sort of regulate the extremes of your emotional cycling. And if you're not self-aware, you get blindsided, and then you have a panic attack or a crash of some kind that can do damage to your occupation or your relationships. So it's better to be aware than unaware.
Sure. The thing, well, not the thing, but a thing that has really been on my mind is this idea of, should the Capitol Police have known? Now, obviously, the answer to that is yes, because I've heard anecdotal stories of people who lived around Washington, D.C. that were telling each other, hey, be careful because something's brewing. So if people on the street knew, then obviously the intelligence agencies knew.
The evidence seems to support that.
Yeah. And so I listened to people talking about, well, why didn't we have a stronger response? Why was the response to Black Lives Matter protesters so much stronger than the response to this crowd that was trying to storm the Capitol building? And to me, that answer is so obvious and so self-evident. It surprises me that more in the media are not promoting this idea. But my theory, and then you can let me know if you agree with this, is that these individuals were at the Capitol or at the White House, and the president addressed them and said, you need to go to the Capitol, you need to fight like hell because your country is being taken from you. And in that moment, he identified that group of individuals as an in-group with him. So the Black Lives Matter protesters were always considered an out-group. This group of individuals was considered an in-group. So when they then went to the Capitol building, I believe that the people who were there and charged with the security of that building also believed that the president had sanctioned that, and they themselves were then facing cognitive dissonance, because if they try and roughly handle this crowd, would they get in trouble? Would they be fired? Would they suffer some kind of consequence because the president has put his stamp of approval on it? And I think each member of the group that actually stormed the Capitol building believed that if anything happened to them, that the president would pardon them because he had told them to go on this mission.
I think many, if not most, of the people who were there are like cattle in a mob, or herd that stampedes when the lightning strikes. And you see the old westerns, and the cowboys are circling the crowd, the herd at night, saying, they're unquiet tonight. There's something coming, weather break or whatever it might be. So, sing to them, keep them calm. Well, nobody even kept them calm. Somebody set off some shots, some lightning hit the ground, and all of a sudden, in an instant, the herd was up and running, and they were yelling stampede, and some of them got run over, some of them got killed. I think that's a decent analogy for what happened. But I think the questions that you're asking require some more perspective than that. There is evidence, if you believe in the validity or importance of evidence in structuring your thinking. If you just go with feelings, then we have a different conversation to have. But there is evidence that people certainly knew that it was coming. People in positions of authority and responsibility knew that it was coming, but that they didn't really believe it would be that bad. So then you ask the question, well, what is their responsibility? Is their responsibility to the evidence that they have, or is it to what they believe? It's the same question that we have for ourselves personally. What's your responsibility for finding facts, getting evidence, making a logical decision, and are your decisions driven by your gut feelings? Are you in the in group or the out group? Are you a Rams fan or a Jets fan? Do you get all emotionally worked up about that crap? And do you allow that to help define your group identity, whether you're wearing the symbols of QAnon or you're raging about the outfits that Antifa supposedly wears or presumptively wears? And then you get back and forth into this whole Black Lives Matter symbolism. The Black Lives Matter protest, several of them were violent, were destructive. Some people in those protests were so full of rage and so lacking in self-control at that moment that they did despicable and horrible things. But they were in other places. They weren't in the United States Capitol. They weren't in the Capitol building. There was a protest outside the White House, but the President of the United States brought in the National Guard and the police and used chemical weapons to disperse them so that he could walk across the street and hold up a Bible in front of the church.
Upside down.
Upside down. Well, I don't think he intended that. I don't think he planned that.
Well, it just means he doesn't know enough about the Bible to hold it right side up.
2 Corinthians discusses that, I think. So I get concerned whenever there's a discussion about these things, when people are reduced to the point of whataboutism. And it reminds me of the logical fallacy of the true Scotsman. And it's a type of argumentation. It's a type of reasoning that people use to make themselves feel good or to try to have the convincer in an argument. The story is, in the analogy is, somebody says a real Scotsman or a Scotsman doesn't put sugar in his coffee. And then somebody else says, well, my cousin's a Scotsman and he puts sugar in his coffee. And the comeback from the first person is, well, then he can't be a real Scotsman. So there's no openness to any kind of factual information. We're not going to change my perspective. I already have a conclusion. So don't confuse me with the facts. I already have my mind made up. And that's the way people go. And people are drawn to identity clusters that make them comfortable and make them feel like they fit and they belong. And when you challenge that identity cluster, they have panic. And I think that's what's going on nationally.
So the problem that I have with the true Scotsman analogy is that when people say to me, hey, you know what, I don't know if school's for me, and I'm like, that's a personal choice, and I don't think anybody should do something that isn't in their wheelhouse. But at the same time, I do think that going to college at the time that we go to college has a benefit that is beyond just being able to get a job. I remember being in college, and I remember actually feeling the neurons in my brain restructuring.
Were you still doing drugs then?
I was.
Oh, okay.
So it could, okay, yes. Thank you for pointing that out. But honestly, I remember taking logic, and I remember being introduced to syllogisms.
Having an epiphany. Yeah.
And
my God, that makes sense. I see that.
Yeah. And the reason that the true Scotsman analogy is troubling to me is that it violates the basic laws of logical syllogism. So in syllogism, if A is B, then B is not C, then A can't be C, right? And that's the basic premise of logic. And what I don't know is, can we agree that logical principles should guide our thinking, or is that no longer a fair and valid argument?
Well, it's always an argument. The question is then, where's the power of conviction? Where does it come from? Does it come from training your mind to think that way?
Right.
Or does it come from messaging from another source, like a church or a political leader that you revere?
Which then doesn't follow the laws of logic.
Right. But you get swept up in that because the in-group, out-group thing. You know, our group all believe this. You have to be a patriot. I grew up in the South in the 1950s and 60s. There was still a huge number of people that publicly revered the Confederacy and saw it as the Civil War as opposed to the war between the states.
Sure.
When I moved up north, I learned that they covered it differently in textbooks and things. It was an eye-opening experience for me to be more objective and more critical, because there were facts involved that had not been presented when I was a child in school. I have an old friend, not a dear friend. I have an old friend from grade school through college, or into college, that he and I have been going back and forth on Facebook since the election in November, trying to convince or persuade each other with our different styles of reasoning. And after the insurrection the other day, he contacted me and said, "You're an arrogant SOB because you read books, you think you know everything, and you're a know-it-all, and I don't want to hear from you anymore." Because he doesn't agree with my analysis and my presentation of whatever I think are facts that challenge his presentation. His response is, "I know in my gut what I feel, and you make me uncomfortable, so go away."
So if, you know what, let's go to our break and let's pick this up on the other side.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it, and as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. All right, we're back, and go ahead.
Well, I don't know if that's relevant to what you want, the point you wanted to make.
No, I think that is I mean, first off, I'm incredibly sad that this relationship that you've had for so much of your life ends. But we've talked about that before when we talked about families that are disbanding essentially over the difference in their political stances. And that's what I think is so relevant in this moment, is the starkness of the out-group manifestation that has been a part of the Trump administration. We need to build walls to keep those Mexicans out.
Right.
We need to put in a travel ban to keep those Arabs out. And he's demonized these groups of individuals and used that as a facilitation.
It's the power of a bumper sticker mentality, sloganeering. If you reduce a complex idea to a bumper sticker, by the rules of bumper stickers, it's not a legitimate or acceptable message if it has more than 7 words. So you have to reduce it down to 7 words, or people won't absorb it. We won't get the message. If you take a complex idea like the pro-life movement, whether or not women should have control over their own bodies' decision-making, or whether the government or the religion or some other group should have a valid and equal or superior say into the decisions that they make. When you try to discuss that, you can't reduce it down to a 3 or 5 word slogan and resolve the argument.
Right.
You don't change minds that way. You set convictions and you retain convictions, but you don't change minds. So if you evolve as a society into areas that have messaging delivery in a single compartment that's reduced down to simplistic slogans, then your society's really in trouble, which is where I think we are.
Well, okay, so I believe that the messaging of the Trump administration was based very specifically in the psychology of outgroup thinking, vilifying certain entities in the world, and using that as a way to sell his plans and the things that he wanted to do. And I think he was really, really good at it. So then my question is, can a Biden administration come in and try and sell a more inclusive in-group mentality and say, hey, we're all Americans. We all need to band together. We all need to fight the virus. We all need to fight racism. We all need to fight injustice. Do you think that we can then...
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
If they only are heard by a small group of people that are receptive to that messaging. If everybody else is over in another room listening to a different message, then there's not going to be cross-contamination of ideas.
So there needs to be something big that happens that gets
Well, and I think there
everybody's
is something
attention.
that has happened. Whether it be maintained or not, I
Yeah.
don't know. And,
Yeah.
and the two things that I think that have happened that are relevant to this: one, Twitter closed off the extreme right-wing Twitterverse from Trump and his proponents who make those arguments. And two, major corporations are now saying to Republicans on the extreme right, we're not going to give you any more money because you're too far out for us.
And we actually have one of those individuals who represent us in Missouri, Josh
Yeah,
Hawley,
yeah.
and he's gone on a campaign of demonizing the people that are trying to hold him to account and saying that it's a witch
Yeah.
hunt. So he's adopted the same language
And
that
strategies that Trump has used,
would
but it's not
use.
going to have the same audience.
Well,
Because
doesn't
Twitter
seem
and
like it.
Facebook are not going
Yeah.
to be available for that messaging the way they have been the last 5 years.
Well, it doesn't appear that even that there's an audience that's listening to him say that, because no one's backing off of the sanctions that they've put in place against him.
Well, it's early days yet. It's
That's
been a
true.
week.
That's true.
So we'll see where that goes.
So my thinking is that we could use the vaccination of the virus, the program of vaccination against the virus, as the all-encompassing, because that's something that affects everybody. Some people may refuse to believe that the virus exists, but we're going to assume that the majority of people do believe the virus exists, that we are going to vaccinate our way out of it, that if the Biden campaign wanted to find something, some big thing, like 9/11, because I've said this before, after 9/11, everybody in my subdivision flew an American flag for 3 months. And I felt like that was something that really brought us together as a nation. We stopped looking at color. We stopped looking at race.
So
we
you're more
stopped looking at
susceptible
religion.
to the in-group thinking than I am. You believe that. You've always believed that. You value that. The question is just how do you define the in-group?
Right.
Can you message a way to expand it
Yeah.
so that more of us are in it?
Exactly.
But you think there's real value and strength in people adopting those identities.
Yes.
And I mean, like being a sports fan for a particular team. When you commit yourself to a team, you dress up in all the regalia, and you watch the team play, and you know the players, and I mean that's a big part of your life. And then it moves on. If that's a political team, same thing, or political ideology, same thing. I'm not as enamored with that as you are.
But I think a lot of people
Yeah.
are
Oh, I
enamored
agree
with
with you.
that.
They are.
And,
Absolutely.
And so it's the difference between being a Rams fan and a Jets fan and being an NFL fan. So you can expand.
Or not being a fan at all and saying it's just a sport. It's just those guys are getting rich and I'm sitting here watching them.
Well,
I got other things. I got a book to read, so I can be a know-it-all.
that can also be a thing.
By the way, I said to my friend who said, "You read books, you think you're a know-it-all." I said, "Well, since you don't read books, perhaps you should watch the movie The Killing Fields to learn what happens when a society has a revolution and starts killing all the people that read books." That's when he said, "Go away, don't ever talk to me again."
Yeah. I can see how that may have not been
Well, he doesn't read.
an argument.
He doesn't
that
believe reading is
won him over.
enhancing to your intellect. So maybe he can watch a movie and get a message.
Yes. I think. Do you think
He was
that
trying to be helpful.
I think he
Did you not hear
experienced
that?
that as condescending.
That's exactly how I experienced it.
But I do believe.
I didn't say it was stupid. I just say he didn't like to read.
that most. Yeah. You didn't say he was stupid.
No, he's not. He's not stupid. And I know people who are not stupid, but they believe differently from me. And I think that's okay as long as we can find common ground to communicate and coexist. When you get to the point of being violent, of threatening to kill people, of trying to burn down buildings, then you're over the line for me. I can't tolerate it.
And what I am saying is that for people who are flexible enough in their thinking to include all ideas as relevant,
Or at least other ideas.
yeah. Then those people aren't going to be subjected to in-group, out-group thinking as much. But for most people, there needs to be an identification with something to feel passionately about it. And we can create that identification by saying we're all Americans fighting the vaccine
Well, see,
or fighting the virus.
Even back when I was in high school, which was many, many years ago, I was opposed to pep rallies. I think it's mob psychology. Let's psych the mob up and point them in a direction. Let's do chants and cheers, 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits a dollar. You know, our side against the other side. We're not enemies. It's a competition. Yeah, we hope our guys win, but so what? You know, and so if you go and have a rally in their hometown and you paint their symbol or something, or burn something in effigy, to me that's just so close to the line of what civilized societies do.
I mean, I understand that, and I don't disagree with what you are saying, but as a person that played sport all the way through high school and was a part of those rallies, it occurs to me that the overwhelming majority of people in the country need to have something to believe in. And that what we can do is to create
maybe I'm just a bitter old
positive-
man because nobody had a pep rally for the debate team when I was in high school.
Well, I can certainly understand why that would make you bitter.
Yeah, me too.
And I will even say, as somebody that played football, that was wrong. We should have had a pep rally for the debate team.
Yeah, okay. I shouldn't have gone there.
But I believe that we have the ability to choose how we're going to perceive our in-group. And for those people who need to have some affiliation to feel positive, we can identify ourselves as Americans fighting the virus, and that can bring us together, and we can stop seeing race. We can stop seeing religion.
Argument that you are making is broaden the focus.
Yeah.
Make it more inclusive. Make it more acceptable to recognize that that the category has more room in it than the way we've been going in a direction that narrows the category.
And I think that the 4 years of the Trump administration, where this real outgroup technology, this real outgroup idea has been used to facilitate their idea, their agenda, really even started before that. When Mitch McConnell said the day that Barack Obama got elected president, my goal is to make Barack Obama a one-term president. And now if Mitch McConnell has a change of heart, if Mitch McConnell actually votes for impeachment, and we don't know whether he will or not, there's news sources that say that he might be willing to do that. If he would be willing to do that, we may even see members of our leadership be willing to move to a more inclusive mentality.
No, not going to happen. Because even if they decide to do that, then there are going to be all the questions about the man's not even in office. Why? He's already dead. Why are you digging him up? Let it go. And that's not constitutional. So then there'll be arguments about whether or not it's constitutional. So there's not an easy answer to this. There's not going to be come to Jesus, let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya.
I don't think that there is.
Okay.
But you always want to destroy my naive optimism.
I do indeed. I do.
But it has to start somewhere. If Mitch McConnell is making noise in his own personal sphere of influence that he's tired of the divisiveness that Trump represents and that he wants to move towards, which is apparently what he's been saying, behind closed doors. Now, whether he'll say that openly or not, I don't know.
Mitch McConnell's ox was gored personally.
Yes.
I
understand.
Sacred chamber was invaded by the mob.
And I hope that mobilizes
the floor
him.
And spread it on the walls.
Yeah.
And that offended him.
As it should.
As it should. I agree. He should be offended. I thought he should have been offended much earlier, much more radically by other things that were happening. It shouldn't have gotten to that point. But it did.
And I'm not saying that Mitch McConnell is the linchpin. I'm just saying this is an example of a guy who was very outgroup thinking when Barack Obama was elected president. If he starts to use more in-group, inclusive language, that can help all of us use that and reinforce that language in our own thinking, and that's how the movement starts.
So again, I think you're falling short here
naively
of comprehension.
Yeah.
You're focusing on the existence, the establishment, the identification of a group. You're not focusing on the agenda of the group. And I think you have to factor that in. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a defined agenda, these are our common goals. This is what we can all strive for, that we can agree on. Because we don't have to agree on everything.
Well,
but we need to find, whether it's spreading the vaccine, how are you going to reach out to minority populations, especially in the black community, and say, the government is not doing to you what it did before when we ask you to take these vaccines.
So raising
how are you going to trust
the
that?
Minimum wage to $15 an hour as a part of the relief package.
So there's an agenda.
Yeah.
You have to come up with the agenda. All right.
And the agenda, that's what I'm saying, the agenda of the Biden administration will be presented as more inclusive.
Well, I wasn't hearing that in what you were saying.
Okay, okay. So then but that is the basis, yes, of what I'm saying is that the new administration is going to promote a more inclusive agenda. If then other leaders that have actually been opposed to that if we see compromise in Congress because they're willing now to hear a more inclusive idea proposed and be willing to support that, we could start a wave.
I feel a hymn coming on. Can we sing Kumbaya?
We can sing Kumbaya.
Okay.
Can we hold hands?
That's probably a bridge too far.
Because of the virus or just because you don't want to hold my hand?
Yes.
All right. So, so I'm not going to say land the plane, but just to put a fine point on this, do you believe, or let me ask you a different question, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no way, 10 being a guarantee, how likely do you believe if the Biden administration can use more inclusive agenda type language and policies and that Congress could get on board with that and that we could actually see that start to make an imprint on the psyche of the average American?
Well, since I'm a registered libtard, then I would say 3.
And I want to say 7.
I know you want to say 10.
I do want to say 10.
Yeah.
I want to say 10.
But you got to be a realist.
I know. All right. Well, hopefully our audience is much more psychologically flexible in their thinking, and they can hear what we're saying, and they can apply some of these strategies to their own lives and their own reality and their own world. And that if enough of us do this, if enough of us start to think more flexibly and more inclusively, that can make a difference. It can make a difference. If enough people do it, it can make a difference.
In my church, we sing a hymn. They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. So hopefully that was educational for people. And as always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. We would love it if you would go on to the Facebook and subscribe to us at Psych with Mike. You can get the podcast at psychwithmike.com. You can follow us on Twitter and on the TikTok at Psych with Mike. And as always, go to Apple Podcasts and find Psych with Mike and rate us and give us a comment. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.